Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema. Sit down! You see the shirt, you see the TV, you know exactly what we're talking about. I'm not going to waste any time because we got so much to talk about. So why don't you pull up a chair, take a seat. We are getting ready to dive in spoiler-filled into WandaVision Episode 3. And this show just does it for me, man. I am really digging the heck out of this. But before I get into anything, I gotta ask, because I thought last week they did a pretty good job of presenting the show and delivering the show in a way that was consumable to, just the casual fan. And my buddy Chris, who's been like really hyped for this show, is a casual fan, and he's a movie fan. He doesn't know the comics. He loved last week. He loved those first two episodes. I would be fascinated to see what he thought of the third episode. And not to say that I don't think that you can't not like them if you don't know what's going on with the comic history and these two characters in particular. But there is so much more to be seen and so many more threads to pull on if you're trying to figure out like theories like I did this past week. I came up with a couple. You can check them out there. But like without that background knowledge, like when I was talking to him, he was like, damn, dude, like, I would have never gotten to any of that stuff. It's like, yeah, well, clearly they're doing a good job at, like, making you be invested, but knowing everything I know, I'm invested even more so. So let me know how the show is playing, specifically after watching episode 3. Like, are you as enamored and wrapped up in this fantastic Marvel mystery like I am, or are you just kind of more, like, almost going by the seat of your pants, just, like, hanging on until more tidbits can get dropped so that you can figure things out. Let me know what you're thinking there. But now, as we turn to episode 3, and we get into the spoilers of this episode, much like I said in my non-spoiler, there are things happening this week that make me think that one of those two theories that I've been kind of posturing with, it could be on track. If you watched my theories video, or if you didn't, I laid out two scenarios where one, Sword could be behind, this potential reality that Wanda has created. Or, on the flip side, it could be Strucker and Hydra, or AIM, kind of driving what's going on, like why this whole situation has happened. Because obviously, if you've watched the movies, we know Wanda doesn't know that she can manipulate reality like this. So what got her to this? What put her inside this reality prison that she's in right now? And I'm not gonna lie, after watching episode 3, and like while I was writing out my theory, the one I originally thought was probably more logical was, Sword being in control. Because it seemed like they're monitoring, that they have access, like, Monica Rambeau is inside this reality. How does any of that happen if they didn't have something to do with it? But the more I kind of laid stuff out, the more I'm like, I think Baron von Strucker is trying to get himself two magical children from a magical child that he used to have. And that is, I think, where we're going. And as you watch episode 3, it just feels like the vibes are pointing that way. But besides just trying to figure out this mystery, and that's the other thing, like, I might feel really confident that is what's going on, but this show in no way, shape, or form has tipped that to a place where I'm like, it's 100% what's going on. Anything I have thought about, I have second-guessed, I've gone back on, I've come back around, and the show does that to you, and that's some of the genius in hiding this MCU mystery, like, specifically for comic book fans, like, the comic book fans are going to be the ones that put those theories and those ideas out into the world, and this show is really keeping you on your toes, where, like, you can't just fully commit to, like, this is definitely what's happening. There's no other possibility. And I love that about this show. As I also love the sitcom elements of this show. I have always been a big sitcom fan, and growing up, I've referenced it in some of the other reviews, but Nickelodeon used to do Nick at Night, where they play all the old school sitcoms, man. And that's, a lot, especially these first couple episodes, really have pulled from there. And as we transition into the 70s era of television, we really kind of hit that Brady Bunch swing, man, right? Like from the style of the clothes to the backyard with the swing set that we've seen Vision building. Like, there are elements in the house that are like spot on. I mentioned it in my non-spoiler and was very disappointed in myself that I didn't put together the Dick Van Dyke vibes from the 1950s episode. But like, if you look at Dick Van Dyke's like kitchen area into the living room, almost spot on, like verbatim in this show. Same with the backyard, and some of the design elements in the house. Very, very Brady-esque, and you definitely feel that throughout the whole episode. But the other sitcom I picked up on a little bit too, it's got a little bit of a That 70s show, not from the 70s, but about the 70s. With the way like Herb is kind of dressed and the way he acts, and there's like a shot with like a car in a driveway. You see someone like underneath the hood when Vision goes to the doctor. He's like working underneath the hood of the car, and like something about it, I was just like, that's kind of 70s show. Like you'd see them work on the car like a bunch. And like I said, I like that they're able to add those elements in to pay homage to those eras, but then, use sitcom tropes and things inside the episode. And with Wanda being pregnant, it's not just 70s tropes, but we get like pregnancy tropes through the whole episode, because you really end up watching essentially like the last 6 months of a pregnancy happen in 24 minutes. Like she goes from being pregnant or becoming pregnant at the end of the last episode, a little baby bump, to like the doctor posits that she's got to be like 3-4 months pregnant, to by the time he leaves, she looks like she's 8 months pregnant, to, she's got twins by the end of the episode. And I love how the episode plays with, some of those classic pregnancy type tropes, right? Like, early on, in the earlier like 50s, 60s, 70s, if you had like that type of storyline going on, it's like, oh, mom's pregnant, you got a kid. It's like, where do babies come from? When mommy and daddy, or when a man and woman love each other really a lot, and the doctor who's on call doing a house visit, not something that's very modern, but again, would have certainly been a thing in the 50s, 60s, and this era, 70s, comes to the house, and is checking her out, and like kind of gives them the like, they're like, how does this happen? Like, and to Vision, who's having the most difficulty with it, and most difficulty not slipping up as he's talking about it, it's like, how does this happen? And the doctor's like, well, when a man loves a woman, and like kind of starts to go down the path of like the classic, birds and the bees convo, and then also like kind of like mentions how like, and I love to like watch Liz Olsen's face when the doctor mentions this, because we're in the 70s, but he's like, to make it easier for women, we kind of follow things by fruit, and like Wanda just immediately like looks like she's taking offense to like, we have to dumb it down to fruit for women with pregnancy, really? Like that's the look she has, and it just, her facial and specifically expressions in and around the eyes are just tremendous, man. She tells such a story in just her face. And that look that she shoots the doctor when he says that was one that I noticed. I was like, I like that. But when you look at it, it is kind of like the joke he's getting at, which is certainly, again, not modern, far more old school, but is like, the different sizes of fruit kind of tell you where you are. And by the time you get to like, he's like, you got apples and pears and papayas. And when you get to 9 months, at the end, it's the honey-do, right? Like honey's due. Really lame, corny jokes, but like stuff that fits that era so perfectly. But when you're not like, just doing the, oh shoot, we're pregnant, or how do you get pregnant, and those types of things that you'd see, kind of worked through in some of these family type sitcom styled shows, you also go through all the other stuff that comes around, right? So like Vision freaking out about being a dad, and we see him like speed testing how fast he can like put a diaper on a baby doll. We, as things are happening, Wanda doesn't know what's going on. Vision's reading through books and trying to find things. It's like, oh yes, the false contraction, or the best way to help through like contractions is like breathing. And the breathing style that they hit in the show is now I can't particularly like off the top of my head remember like the Brady Bunch having an episode around pregnancy, but like sitcoms that I grew up with, things like Full House or any number of sitcoms like from when I was growing up and stuff that you would watch, that breathing technique, very, very, very like specific, like the you go back through time and you just like go on a sitcom binge and you hit episodes that have to deal with like pregnancy and having a kid, that breathing sound, like I just remember Aunt Becky and Uncle Jesse on Full House, doing that sound like a ton. And the thing that's always funny with that sound is, while it's supposed to help with the contractions, it always seems to just help calm the dad from freaking out more. And like, as Vision's losing his mind and how fast things are like transpiring, he starts like getting like kind of kooky, and he starts to float. And you watch Wanda kind of him back down to the ground. I was like, they're nailing everything you could possibly want them to nail when it comes to the sitcom realm and how to deal with the problems that present themselves in an episode. That's the big thing with all sitcoms, right? It's like you're presented a situation or a problem like right at the top, and it's like, how can you use the sitcom format to figure out that problem? And you're seeing that very much here. Is like, you're getting a pregnancy through 9 months, and it's, you know, Wanda and Vision freaking out. You got the breathing. They do the nursery. And in all honesty, I think it would have been funnier if Vision was failing miserably at building a crib, because that seems to always be a really difficult thing for dads to do in sitcoms. And then have Wanda come in and use her magic to build everything. But regardless, you see them build, like the whole nursery setup, and getting ready, and then they have the back and forth on names, it starts, and it's again one of those things like you would see in a TV show. Like, you haven't had that conversation about the names yet, and like Vision says something that he feels like the babies could take offense to, or the baby, they don't know it's twins at this point, but he's like, not to make you think like I don't want you to come, I'm so excited for you, little Billy. And she's like, Billy? And she's like, I'm thinking more like an American, like traditional, like Tommy, like a good old, like, American name. And Vision, I love that it's Bettany that uses Billy as like, well, Billy Shakespeare, and like quote Shakespeare, because I always think of Bettany, like the first thing that comes to mind when I think of him, and specifically seeing him not act like here where he can kind of be zany and out there, is A Knight's Tale, and his character is very Shakespearean in his delivery of things. So I love that, like, he's the one that's like, oh no, we call him Billy because it's Shakespeare, and she wants Tommy because it's like a traditional American name, like trying to fit. She's still locked in that trying to fit in, and go unnoticed type bit. But hearing those names as a comic fan, I was just like, oh yeah, like I know. We all know, if you know comics, you know that by the end of the episode it's going to be twins, and we know that these twins will go on to become the characters Speed and Wiccan. But the actual names of those characters, Speed's name is Tommy, Wiccan's name is Billy, and like hearing them and like legitimately confirming like Speed and Wiccan are going to enter the MCU, it was just cool because until it's actually confirmed, even if you think these things are going on, much like any of the theories that I'm having in general, until it's actually confirmed in the show, you don't really know. So that was just like a cool moment to kind of hear them go back and forth on the names like that, knowing that will be the names of the kids. And, and you just see them kind of doing all of these things around the pregnancy that fits perfectly inside the sitcom world. But the thing that I continue to be most impressed in is how they adapt this sitcom world into the reality of the MCU. And like we talked about, last week, and specifically even more so in my theories video, that like the more Wanda uses her powers of manipulation over reality, the more she kind of loses control of those. And it seems that is continuing to grow here. I mean, we get into the nursery, and all of a sudden, like, they're just talking, and the carousel of butterflies turns into real butterflies. And you actually hear Wanda say out loud, like, did I do that? I didn't mean to do that. And it's one of these things where it's like, are there things that are happening in the world that she can subconsciously control without realizing that she's doing it? Even to the point, like later on in the episode, we see some of the characters seemingly break, like we've seen in other episodes, but in ways where it's almost more like that hold that's been on them is kind of fading a little bit. And I expect things to ramp up and get kind of wilder and crazier, and we see it throughout the entire episode, while she's dealing with the contractions, right? Like, you're going through all that contraction stuff, and Vision's doing all the funny sitcom things. She hits pain and the lights flicker, and then all the electronics go on in the kitchen, which I loved, because like any comedy-oriented thing that has to deal with magic, you're probably going to see, like, doors and cabinet doors and things turning on, and to the point where Vision freaks out and he's just like, the kitchen's losing its mind, let's get out of here. And as they're getting out of here, like, the light in the room gets, like, real bright, and then, like, everything dies down. And, like, Wanda's pain ripples through the reality in causing all the mayhem inside their house. When Vision goes outside to check on the neighborhood, the whole block is down. So, like, what she's doing is affecting everything in this town. The other thing, though, I love about that moment in particular, and I'm going to slide over, give a little room so we can bring up the image of Wanda and Vision, where they're kind of standing, Vision's very much like this. Wanda's got kind of like this thing going on, as you can see. Well, if you bring up next to that, the original comic cover of Vision and the Scarlet Witch, #1, is that image. Like, oh, that's what I mean. Like, this show goes so deep cuts. Like, does it work? Do you get maybe not as excited, but are you finding excitement or things to get kind of giddy about without knowing things? Like, that image is a comic, like, right off the cover of a comic book. Because that's the stuff that I love in here, man. Like, they're playing it up for sure in the show for comic book fans, and I'm, like, just giddy about all of it. But I do digress, as I sometimes will. But, like, seeing that shot, I was just like, that's so cool. But, by the time you get to the end of that kind of sequence, the last thing that happens is, like, you've had these fake contractions. Wanda's gotten a lot bigger out of nowhere. And then all of a sudden, like, her water breaks, and it just starts pouring. And, like, she goes, Vision, I think my water broke. And Vision's like, yeah, I know that's what happened, because all the pipes basically burn. It almost looks like fire sprinklers turn on. But we find out, like, it's happening in other places. We actually see a shot, like, when the power goes out, they cut to Dottie, who turns out is married to Phil, the guy with the mustache that's, like, emptying out his desk and carrying the box out in the first episode from where Vision works. And we see him sitting at the same table as Dottie during the talent show. Confirmed they're married, and, like, she comes out and she's like, do you think these earrings make me look fat? Like, one of those questions where no matter what Phil says, he's going to get in trouble. And then the lights dim down and he's like, oh, thank God. Like, those moments where it's like, it is affecting everything you're seeing happen in that house is affecting other houses on the block. And it was just like a cool little cutaway moment that you might see in a sitcom when something large scale is happening in a small area. But like I said, like, you see all the water come down. It's like, okay, now clearly the babies are going to be here soon. So Vision's like, I got to go get the doctor. And one of those other kind of classic sitcom tropes, the doctor's like, yeah, me and the wife are going to Bermuda this afternoon. And Vision gets there, and by the time Vision gets there and you get to the end of the episode, everything's, like, settled, and the babies, and Vision's like, so you and your wife, going to make it to vacation? He's like, nah, man, we're not gonna go. Come on, small town, like, you're trapped. And it's like one of those things where it's like hinting at the fact that, like, Wanda's got some sort of mind control on the people that are in this town. Whether this town involves actual people who live in a town, or if they're Hydra or sword agents, like, whatever she's doing to reality can keep some of their consciousness out of whatever it is that she's created here. And it was, just kind of fun to, like, yeah, well, we were going to try to go, but car's is out of gas, or it's not working, or, there's always something. So he goes and he gets the doctor, he brings him back to the house. And while he's out getting the doctor, we get to spend some time with Teyana Prince's Monica Rambeau, or Geraldine, as she is inside our little town of Westview. And, I said in my non-spoiler, I really dug Prince's episode. She gets to have a lot of fun, and specifically a conversation. She gets to spend a lot of time with Wanda. And, like, Wanda is literally in the process of, like, having contractions near birth. And, like, they don't want anyone in the town to know that this is happening, because it wouldn't make any sense. Like, you see Wanda one day, and then the next day she's just 9 months pregnant. Like, that's not gonna sit or fly with anybody. So, like, even when, Vision first walks the doctor out at the beginning of the episode, he's like, let's just keep this between us for right now. Like, it's all happening kind of fast. We don't want to freak people out. So, knowing that, like, when Geraldine shows up, Wanda immediately is like, oh no, what do I do? Like, the door knocks, Vision's gone. So her immediate thing is, I'm gonna grab a coat. And she throws a coat on to try to hide the baby bump. Geraldine is coming in because, her house, like, all the water like all the pipes burst, and she needs like a bucket or something like that. And she just kind of like, once she opens the door, just kind of like walks on in, and Wanda's like, nee. And she's like, I'll go get it. I think there's a bucket in the kitchen. Like when she runs, she's just trying to figure out like how to control these contractions and the pain, which is why she wants to go to the kitchen so that you can't see it. And in doing so, as she has it, like the jacket changes, right? So it goes from like the jacket she has on to a raincoat to a fur jacket. Again, like that power set is doing stuff on its own. You know, Wanda doesn't have full grasp on it. She's starting to kind of lose it a little bit the more that she has used it in the reality it would appear. But as she's doing it, like she finally gets the bucket or whatever, you know, gives it to Geraldine, and you think you're gonna get her out, you know, and it's like one of those things where it's like Geraldine's coming in behind her, so like there's the bucket, she like grabs a bowl of fruit to hold in front of her stomach to try to like hide the fact that she's pregnant, and you know, Geraldine's like, oh, Wanda, wonderful fruit, like grabs an apple and is about to leave, and then she's like, oh, but did I tell you about this temp job that I'm working, like bestie? And that's one of the other weird things too with the show is like it almost functions like a sitcom where it feels like time has passed in between these episodes, but knowing where we ended in episode 2 and where we started in episode 3, no time has passed. Like it's just day 2, like it's the next morning from what we just watched. But it seems like sitcoms, there are time like where like Geraldine is like best friends with Wanda, and like they clearly haven't known each other very long. That's another one of the interesting things in the sitcom-y world, which might actually be part of the reality, as we've seen, like Sword is monitoring what looks like a sitcom on their monitoring screen. But anyway, so sure enough, you know, Geraldine sits on down, and it's one of those, like, again, like it's a sitcom thing where there's something that you don't want someone to see. So I'm distracting. I'm getting your attention over here. Hey, look at me. Let's come over here. Okay. Now you've done whatever you got to do. I want to get you out the door. And as I'm trying to get you out the door, something else comes in that I can't let you see. And that's a real live stork. Like the stork, I thought it was going to be the stork painting that we see in the nursery coming to life. But later on, the stork goes in there and matches himself up literally right where the painting is. And you can see the painting behind him. So I don't think it's the painting stork, but like a stork appears as, you know, again, like Wanda is having contractions and feeling pain. Things are happening out of her control. So the stork appears, and as Geraldine is like getting ready to leave, and honestly, the stork's like, no, actually, just sit down. Tell me your story. And it's one of those things like you'll see in sitcoms if you watch them. Like you'll be like, I gotta divert your attention. Okay, now I want to get you out the door. Shit, something's in front of the door. Come back over here so you don't see what's going on. And watching Wanda try to cover. You know, and it's one of those things I've loved all 3 episodes is watching Vision and Wanda try to cover for themselves so they don't stand out. Seeing her do it with Geraldine is really funny because it's, you know, give your attention over here. And there's actually a moment where she tries to make it disappear. You see her do like the finger thing down low, and you get this poof of red smoke, and then the bird just kind of flaps its wings and keeps moving in and keeps dismissing it. Again, like her power's not quite working the way that they should. I like that, like, you see, the more she uses the manipulation of reality, she has seemingly less control of her powers. And when the bird does it twice, she hits it with it twice, and both times just kind of flies right through the smoke, so to speak. Like, as he's coming around, like, Geraldine's about to say something, and she throws like an orange at the stork to make it go away, and Geraldine's like, what? And then you hear like the stork, it goes behind the couch and it makes a noise that Geraldine hears, and immediately it's like, oh, you mean that's the new ice machine that's in this, like built into the refrigerator. And Geraldine's like, oh, okay, well, I'll go back to my story then. And then you get this other moment where now the stork is trying to come around the other side. I love this. You come in on a close-up and it's trying to grab her pants, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is no good. But then you see what the pants are, and you understand why the stork's going after him. She's got fish on her pants. So you see the stork, like the beak lines up with the tail of one of the fish on like the edge of her pant leg. Genius. And again, like right as it's about to be found out, like Geraldine moves and it runs away and then disappears into the room, and then Geraldine's like about to get up and leave, and she's like, oh, do you guys still have, I don't remember what, she's asking for something else that she thinks is being kept in the spare room. She's like, I could really use this thing. and just gets up to go into the room like she knows. And Wanda's like, no, don't do that, because the stork's in there. When they walk in, that's where the stork is now lined up with the drawing of the stork. And Geraldine's like, oh my gosh, Wanda. And she's like, I know the stork. She's like, no, the crib. Like, are you guys? And then Wanda has a full-blown, like, real last contraction. Like, things are happening, and she drops all the fruit. And then Geraldine's like, oh my gosh, you're pregnant. And then we end up, jumping back outside. And you see Vision finally showing up with the doc, and as he's or maybe we jump to him arriving at the docks, and like you see him working on the car. He's like, me and my wife are going to Bermuda, driving to Bermuda. I don't know that makes any sense, but they're getting ready to go on like vacation or whatever, and it's not working. And Vision's like, we really need your help, and he just takes off, and you see the wife pop out of the car like, are we going? What's going on here again? One of those very sitcom-y things where it's like something just happened on screen that makes absolutely no sense, but we're gonna like ignore it and like stay focused on the thing that we're focused on. But as Vision is making his way back with the doc, Geraldine gets Wanda on the ground and helps deliver the first baby before Vision and the doctor get there. And again, one of these things that you'll see in TV, in general, specifically way back like 50s, 60s, 70s, if you were dealing with this stuff, it's like if you're gonna have a pregnancy, a lot of medical shows get really, 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 really realistic nowadays. Back in the day, it's like, okay, you're pregnant, you're gonna sit here, there's gonna be something that ends up in front of you, so when you do the big push, we'll be here, and then we cut to see the emergence of the baby, and what it is like, you can see Wanda's head, the couch is covering everything up, and then Geraldine comes up holding the baby. And you get this wonderful moment with Vision, where he comes in with the doctor, and sees the first baby. He's like, oh my gosh, I missed it. Like, he's completely let down. And I love, and I said this last week too, how real that relationship feels between Wanda and Vision, and how like real the love between them is. And it's one of those things that I love about the show, I find super endearing, is watching Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany get to play out that relationship that they couldn't have on the big screen. You know what I mean? Like in Infinity War, they talk about how like we got to steal time to be with each other. So getting to see them like be with each other, like even in an alternate fake kind of reality that Wanda's created, it's wonderful. And like he is really let down that he misses the birth of his son, and then like why that's happening. Like Geraldine is like, oh, Doc, why don't you help me with something in the kitchen, so that like Vision can have a moment with Wanda. And Wanda like looks at him, and she's I don't know what they did. She is literally glowing in the episode, and like she's like, don't you want to see your son in your own face? And you see the cartoony elements of Vision's face changing is now moved into a seamless, like just one thing where it all kind of changes, and he gets to see his kid. And then sure enough, there's a second one, so they deliver the second one or whatever. And same thing, like once everything's done, the doc is like holding the kids or whatever, gives them to Wanda, and Vision's like, I'll walk the doc out. So he walks out with the doc, and you're left with again Geraldine and Wanda. And you see Vision go out, and he kind of like says whatever he's got to say to the doc, and the doc leaves, and we can hear Agnes and Herb talking next door. And this is one of those other things that I absolutely loved, is like when you're in the driveway and you're looking to like the right where Herb's house is, you got like bushes, and you got like his house, and then what looks like the rest of the yards and the street going down, but it's very, very clearly a giant like piece of cardboard or a wall that like has been painted to look like that, which you would see in sets all the time back in the day. You need to fill, you're in inside of a recording sound stage. You're not out in like an actual suburb, but you need it to look like a suburb. Let's take it and make a drawing so that it looks like it, but it's flat. It doesn't quite mesh with the 3D reality of everything else that's around. Loved that was what was behind her when he's standing by the bushes talking to Agnes. But as Vision is kind of ushering off the doctor, you hear the two of them in the background talking, and they're very clearly talking about Geraldine. Like, did you see how she just walked in there? Like, is she still inside? What's the deal with that? And like Vision can kind of pick up on it, and immediately is like, what are they talking about? Let me go see. How's it going, neighbors? And then we go back inside, and this is where those like you get those like real like unsettling undertones, and we even get one earlier in the episode that I kind of didn't forget about, but breezed right through, where after the doctor leaves the first time, Vision kind of goes outside and he sees Herb or whatever, and he's like, "Hey neighbor," and he's like, "How's it going?" And Herb is like doing the trimming the bushes, and then his saw starts going into the dividing wall. And Vision's like, "Herb, you okay, man?" Like, he's like, "Oh, would you look at that? What do you know I did?" And he just kind of keeps going. It's one of those moments, much like the dinner party with the hearts, where like there's like almost a reality break in his face, where he just kind of gets locked into what he's doing, and it disturbs Vision. Like, you can see it in Vision's face. He is disturbed by the fact that there is something clearly wrong. And when he goes back inside, he's like, that's where Wanda's like, "It seems like the town is just always one step away from figuring us out." And he's like, "Yeah, it is that, but like more so, like the dinner party and, what just happened with her, like there's something wrong here." It's that line we've seen in the trailers. And then instead of getting like the rewind, it's literally like a digital streaming blip. It was weird. Like, it doesn't, I don't know what it means, because it doesn't line up with like a 70s piece of television. Like, oh, in the 70s you would make this type of a cut to go backwards. It's like, it almost felt like the stream like blipped. And all of a sudden it was just like a bloop, and you were right back like 30 seconds prior to him saying that, and then Vision says something different again. Same thing, well, not same thing, you don't get a blip so much, but that unsettling uneasiness that kind of seeps in is super, super apparent when he is approaching Agnes and Herb. And then when you go back into the house, there's also an unsettling reality feel. Like, it no longer feels like a sitcom. And that kind of, the show kind of sways in and out of the sitcom realm. And at the end of the episode, it really swings full on out. And Wanda's kind of just looking at the babies or whatever. And out of nowhere, it's like she has a moment of lucidity, where it's like, twins. I was a twin. And she reflects on Pietro. And it's like, when you watch Liz Olsen and she disappears into that, you can feel all the pain and all of the grief that comes with knowing like that you had a twin and then he died. But the minute that she brings up Pietro, and kind of in and of herself almost sounds more like the Wanda we know, where granted her accent has swung in and out in the movies, it almost seems like she's closer to sounding like the Wanda, accent that we know than this sitcom version of Wanda. And she starts talking about Pietro like, "I had a brother, something happened to him," or whatever. And in doing that, like I said, like she's doesn't quite have a firm grasp on everything the way that she did the first two episodes. In doing that, that breaks Geraldine. And Geraldine gets a moment of clear-headed lucidity and just blurts out, "Ultron killed Pietro." And before that, mind you, we get this wonderful bit like where she mentions that Pietro was her twin, and then she starts singing in Sokovian to the babies. And it's beautiful and like this really heartwarming, touching, motherly moment. But at the same time, just the delivery and the look and the way that she's looking and sounding more like Wanda is really unsettling too, like while you're watching it. And then when Geraldine kind of snaps into, oh, like she must realize I'm actually Monica Rambeau, I have a mission, she just blurts out like, "Oh, Ultron killed Pietro." And Wanda is immediately like, "What'd you say? What do you mean?" And in the comics, what leads into the House of M is Wasp accidentally mentioning that Wanda once had twins, and it's kind of something that she gets hung up on, like, "Wait, what did you say about kids? I had kids?" And Wasp in the comic is like, "Oh, no, that's not what I meant." And here it's the same kind of thing. It's like, "Wait, what did you say?" And Geraldine immediately tries to recover, and again, it's in the eyes. You can see it in the actor's eyes that now, like at that moment, Monica is totally present the whole time. Like she swings into being Geraldine, but you can tell that it's Monica acting as Geraldine. It's really, really like subtle. But the same way that like Wanda can go from looking like the sitcom version to her to just in the look that she has on her face look more like the Wanda we know. And Geraldine immediately is like, I said something, about like the twins or, she said whatever. And she's like, no, what did you say about Pietro? And like the seriousness and the scariness to Wanda's delivery gives you chills. And right as you're getting to like, what's gonna happen, and you figure it's like her sending her back out, because we've seen in the trailers like Monica come flying out of that kind of TV static force field that's around this area that Wanda's in. And you think that's what we're gonna get, and then we jump back outside to Vision, and Vision looks really unsettled as he's getting closer and closer to Agnes. And you can hear her and Herb talking about very clearly Monica's character, like, well, what's going on with her? It's not good. And as Vision gets in, it's like, hey, what's going on? Like, Geraldine, how well you know Geraldine? It's like, what do you mean? Like, just friends with Wanda? She's like, well, she just moved here. Like, she's very new to town. Like, she wasn't here before. And the minute they said that, that's, again, what kind of makes me feel like this is Strucker, who got Wanda to create this reality. And I think Strucker is trying to get his hands via Hydra or AIM on those children. And it would seem like the way that they're talking, almost like we're inside this reality, we know what's going on. That person doesn't belong. I don't trust that person. And as Vision gets closer, they're trying to cover themselves without giving it away. But like, it's weird. Like, it's like the hold in which Wanda has on them, much like we saw with like the hearts, and what we saw with Geraldine a little bit, is kind of worn off, where they can kind of be somewhat lucid, but not fully go there. It's weird. It's like, it almost feels like maybe they know that Vision's not real, and like Herb is maybe spent time with him to the point where it's like, well, he seems real enough. Like, Geraldine, we're not okay with her because she knows we're, and like he hesitates on the we're, and I was waiting for them to say Hydra agents, or that like something else is going on. And they basically just point out like she's new to town, she doesn't have a home. And the minute they say she doesn't have a home, that's when it switches for Vision. He's like, well, that's weird. And then we cut, back inside, and we see Vision come in, and he's like, where's Geraldine? And Wanda's like, oh, she had to leave. And she's just got this maniacal look on her face as she's looking over the babies, and it's like that evil Wanda that's kind of broken through, like where I said, like, even when the hearts, like when Mr. Hart was choking, seemed like that darker version of Wanda was more present, and that the good elements of Wanda all seem to be within Vision. Same thing here, man, and it scares Vision. It's like I'm seeing two sides of Wanda, because we know Vision is definitely a creation. And like watching him react to things that he's seeing in the world and seeing Wanda do, like he looks almost kind of like, oh man. And then of course we do cut and we see Monica go flying out, and we see all the sword people outside the perimeter of this kind of television-y screen static force field thing going on. And that's the end of the episode. But like I said, you get to the end of all of it, and you kind of go through with what's happening. It just feels like this is a Hydra thing. Like Strucker is the one that got Wanda to create this reality, and he's using it to try to get his hands on these kids. And I'm thinking that the people inside are Hydra agents. And the fact that like Monica doesn't fit, one of those things that I posit is maybe she was following Wanda. Maybe Wanda went somewhere. That's how she comes into contact with Strucker, which eventually leads to this whole Westview town thing. Maybe Monica was tracking her, and she got pulled into, the vortex of the reality or whatever. But like she wasn't supposed to be there. She doesn't technically have anywhere to go, because there'd be nowhere for her to go in this reality. Well, it's one of those like real interesting. Next week is probably going to be a big episode, giving us some more background on S.W.O.R.D. and what's going on. And I think we could see a confirmation next episode that, like, not necessarily who's behind everything that's going on, but at least more confirmation into what S.W.O.R.D's angle is. Now, the only other thing that we didn't talk about is the commercial. And we know that for me, I thought the commercial was speaking to things that are present in the show, right? Like that the toaster, very clearly referencing Stark Industries, tie that to that helicopter that we saw that was red and gold, and you're like, maybe Stark Industries is working with S.W.O.R.D. to provide S.W.O.R.D. things that they need, as clearly that team is built or whatever. And you get that second one, the Strucker watch, and that was like, well, Strucker watch, like clearly he must be playing at all of this, and that's how I've kind of gotten to the Strucker theory. You get to this third one, And then, of course, the other side of that coin is like those two commercials not just represent potential people that could be in the world, but things from, Wanda's past. The toaster sounds like the Iron Man suit and sounds like a bomb beeping, which clearly is a reference to, her origins in Sokovia. Then you have the Strucker bit, which is, a clear reference to the traumatic effects of being, safeguarded, I'm sure is probably what he said, but basically being held hostage and then scientifically experimented on by Strucker and Hydra. You get to this commercial, and it's like, you see it's the same lady, but now there's like a kid and there's a dog and things in the house are just going crazy, and they're like, do you need a break? And she's like, yes. And it's a soap commercial, it's where it's kind of like a not dry soap, I don't know what, but like to make like a bubble bath, basically. They call it Hydra soak. And like listening to them, they were like, do you want to float away or whatever? And I was like, if you're going backwards, maybe referencing floating away, like Sokovia actually floating up into the air, that would be, the third big traumatic thing prior to, Pietro's death that happens to Wanda. Or it could be, like I said, in that future, we're hinting again at Hydra. And I think when you add in, like the Hydra soak, that commercial comes right after, like, Wanda's water breaks and all the rain, the water falls down in the house. Like, it just feels like the commercial is, again, hinting at the fact that, like, Hydra is here. And Hydra might be in control. You know what I mean? Or in control to a degree. Like, got Wanda to start doing this, and now Wanda is losing that control and is manipulating things that maybe she shouldn't be manipulating. But this week's commercial, way more vague than the last two, outside of the fact that the product is from Hydra. So I don't know. I'm like I said, it's a stretch. The floating, like they said floating, and I just was like, oh, Sokovia floated. So maybe that is the backwards. But I think the commercials maybe are more what I was originally thinking, which is stuff and leading and hinting at things that are existent currently in the world. But yeah, I mean that's where we're at. And like I said, based on what we've seen in the episode, the way Agnes and Herb are reacting around Vision, and reacting to, like, Geraldine's presence in the town. I think this is a Baron von Strucker Hydra AIM type situation. The other thing too that I've been noticing a ton in the background is you'll see, I think in my non-spoiler I said diamonds. They're hexagonal, the six sides. But we've seen in the background in this episode a bunch, specifically in the opening credit sequence. Those hexagons are more square than rectangular, so less looking like a diamond and more like a stop sign almost. AIM's symbol involves a hexagon, so there is definitely tons of hinting going on to the fact that, like, AIM is somewhere in here, and knowing that Strucker created AIM from inside of Hydra as like a division, that seems to line up. Like, maybe he's created AIM here, and we keep saying Hydra because in the MCU, if you don't know the comics, all you would know is Hydra, and then we're going to find out that maybe AIM is involved in some way. But yeah, I mean, 3 episodes in, and I think I know what's going on. They're definitely fanning the fires of comic book fans as you watch this, with all the hints in the background. And like I said, like, if you look in the background, you're gonna see like that gemstone shape all over the place. I think the stone has something to do with what's going on here, or playing into the show in some way. Obviously, like the Hydra and the Strucker stuff. And you got the sword stuff going on with Monica, and as much as I think I might know what's going on, the show is still doing a really good job of making me go, but am I sure? Am I sure? And that's what you want a good mystery to do, man, is keep you guessing the entire time. And 3 episodes in, I got lots of guesses. I don't have any confirmation. So there you go, man. Those are all my spoiler-filled thoughts on this episode of WandaVision. Tons of great sitcom elements, tons of nods, to that era of sitcom. Tons of Marvel Easter eggs. And a storyline progression now that has inserted 2 kids into the world. I'd imagine that we're probably going to see them age up fast as well as their birth was. So, you know, we've got that to look forward to. But yeah, I mean, we're getting ready. We got the 80s next week. We're going to see probably like new, you know, first time parenting type stuff going on. And, you know, I imagine that we'll probably see maybe some more of what's going on the outside of this, you know, kind of force field that exists around Westview. So fantastic, man. 3 episodes in. This show's doing all the things I want it to do, and I still can't freaking completely figure out exactly what is going on. And I love that you don't know that. So from the comic elements to the sitcom elements to just creating a story that's really interesting that is going to set up the next phase of the MCU. WandaVision's doing everything I want it to do 3 episodes in, so I am loving it. The question is, are you, man? What are your thoughts on WandaVision? It is the spoiler review, which means you can be spoiler heavy down in the comments, man. Anything you're thinking about, any questions you have, things that you maybe picked up on that I didn't mention, or things that you know you're not sure of. You want to ask me, give me your thoughts, what you're digging and not digging. Like I said, if you don't have the comic background, is this show working as much as it's working for someone like myself? Anything you're thinking about WandaVision, and specifically Episode 3, things like, what do you think it'll be named? We mentioned that in the non-spoiler. They've put names up on the first 2 episodes now. I wonder by next week what the 3rd episode will be. The first one was from a live studio audience, and then the second one was Don't Touch That Dial. Kind of catch phrases or taglines that you could associate with television from the 50s and 60s. So what do you think your 70s tag could be for episode 3? Anything good, bad, and different about the episode, where we're going, anything you're thinking, down below in the comment section. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out with me every Friday morning when we're talking non-spoiler stuff. And then if you want those spoiler-heavy details, the things that dive into the comics, and maybe a little bit more what's going on, you want to be here for all that, you haven't yet, come join C-Maniac Nation by jumping over there, hitting that subscribe button. Hit that little bell if you want those alerts so you can be here for all of our WandaVision coverage, or just, you know, coverage on movies, television, trailers, anything that's going on in the world. And other than that, that's it, man. You guys do that for yourselves and for me, as it makes me happy. And I'll just keep thinking about this show until next week. But until then, for the C-Man Cinema Sit Down, I've been the C-Man. I'm signing off. Peace! Well, as I live and breathe, you still here? Check out a video like this one, or this one, and hit the subscribe button so you can get alerts and check out everything the C-Man's got at the Cinema Sit Down.